Reagan Zabrowski, and Kellen Howell. So thank you, ladies, for helping us with this. Joining us tonight, we are going to have each of the candidates for the County Board of Supervisors, but in order to maintain social distancing, we are having them come in one district at a time. So we're going to start with District 1, and we have the Republican candidate Keith Radig and the Democrat candidate Kevin McCormick. We will give each candidate 1 minute to make an opening statement, and then we will have our panelists ask them questions. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer the same question, and we will alternate who goes first. The candidates were informed of this forum structure prior to this, but they have not seen the questions. So I would like to ask you gentlemen to make your opening statements, and we're going to start with Mr. McCormick over on the far end. So go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. My name is Kevin McCormick. I'm 42 years old. I am married and have an 8-year-old daughter. I was born and raised here in Sioux City, and I'm proud to be an Iowa native. I have strong Midwestern values rooted in working hard, doing the right thing, and being a person of integrity. I've had several careers over my lifetime. I was an auto mechanic for 9 years out of college. I owned and operated a small construction company for about 5 years. And more recently, I chose to take an early retirement after serving for about 8 years with the Sioux City Police Department as a police officer and a detective. I believe strongly in honesty and integrity. I speak truthfully from the heart, and if I tell you that I will do something, I will do it. I view this position as a loud voice for all people, all residents of Woodbury County, and if elected, I'll promise to work hard to resolve issues that are most important to you. Thank you.
And Mr. Radig.
I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, and I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for organizing this event. I'm Keith Radig, and most of you know me from my service to the City Council and my term of 4 years on the Board of Supervisors. Others may know me from my 15 years of work at Home Furniture as a salesman. And I'd like to point out that as a salesman, you don't make it very far if you don't have honesty and a hard-working attitude. I'm married to my wife Meredith. I have 4 kids and we have a dog, and this year we added our first grandchild. Becoming a grandpa has only made me more passionate about Woodbury County and making it the best place to live, work, and raise a family. My first priority has always been the budget and keeping tax levies down. I have proven that I can be trusted with your tax dollars. My second priority is making sure there's more affordable housing development in our communities in Woodbury County. And my third priority is economic development and making sure that we overcome the county's obstacles to development.
Thank you. And we're going to start the questions. Let's just go in order. So Kristen, we'll start with you and then we'll work our way down. Okay. And you can direct your first question to Mr. Radig.
Okay. Mr. Radig, how would you oversee the operation of the new jail to ensure the ongoing balance between facility maintenance and operations compared to other priorities in the budget?
That's a great question. The LEC, or the new jail, is mostly under the sheriff's supervision. The county supervisors are really more of a pass-through of the funds. But as a supervisor and somebody that was involved in a lot of the planning on this new facility, we ensured that from the get-go there was a sinking fund for maintenance, so that as things come up in the facility, they're going to be maintained properly and it's not going to be what we faced the last time around. I think we've done a lot of planning on this facility, and one of the main concerns was finding sources of revenue with this new facility. So that's why we've been working with different partners along the way to ensure that, yes, we can maybe take some federal inmates, we can maybe take inmates from other counties, and that way we're getting that revenue to put money aside in the sinking fund and offset those operating costs.
And Mr. McCormick, could you answer the same question, please?
Sure. If elected, I look forward to overseeing construction of the new law enforcement center. I mentioned earlier that I've got a background in construction, and so I want to make sure that this go-around best practices are performed, common sense decisions are being made, and our hard-earned tax dollars are being spent wisely. That was a mistake that was made 30, 40 years ago with the current jail, and now here we are having to come up with $50 million in order to build a new one. I did support the jail. I do believe that we need a new jail and law enforcement center, but it's a difficult pill to swallow.
Thank you. Teresa, if you would direct your next question to Mr. McCormick.
Mr. McCormick, if elected, what are your top 3 priorities?
So I've got 5 priorities, but the top 3 in order would be starting with mental health. Unfortunately, I was involved in an incident at work about 6 years ago, and from it I walked away with very little physical injury, but I did have some mental health concerns, and so that's near and dear to my heart. I want to do everything that I can to increase access and awareness to mental health in Siouxland. Number 2 has to do with turf wars. In my research leading up to this point, I've spoken with a lot of people, and I've determined that there seems to be some turf wars between city councils and county government, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think that when we're all working together, we're much stronger. We are serving, after all, the same people. And then the final one has to do with the law enforcement center. And again, if elected, I want to just oversee the law enforcement center construction to make sure that common sense decisions are being made and that best practices are being performed.
Thank you. Mr. Radig, would you answer the same question, please?
Sure thing. Yeah, my first priority, again, has always been the budget and focusing on where we're spending our money, how we could maybe save money in the future, because the goal is to keep the tax levies as low as possible. And I've proven time and time again that I can be trusted with tax dollars in Woodbury County. I found ways to consolidate services, consolidate positions within the county. When we went to 24-hour paramedics countywide, when we lost Siouxland paramedics, we just basically shifted positions. My second priority would be affordable housing throughout the county and our communities of Woodbury County. We have a lot of new homes being built in the 350 to 500,000 range, and we have a lot of new apartment buildings being built. But we need to work with the state of Iowa and the housing tax credits to build more affordable housing. And again, my third priority is economic development, utilizing our TIF dollars better, and overcoming any obstacles to our development.
Thank you. And Ms. Adamson, would you please direct your question to Mr. Radig?
Sure. So considering that projects regarding gravel roads could cost the county approximately $31 million over the next 5 years, in your opinion, where is the county at regarding those roads that need to be fixed? And if elected, how would you move things forward?
Sure thing. We've actually put together a plan on gravel roads, and the number we're given from our engineer was actually $10 million. And we have a plan to use TIF revenue, and we have TIF the roads and throughout the county to use that revenue for that project. Right now, that is kind of held up in a legal discussion, I'll call it. But over the last couple of years, our engineer's budget has gone up considerably. Just last year, it went from $8 million to $10 million. And you have to factor in that we lost about a $1.3 million special assessment levy to replace bridges. So for that kind of an increase over the 4 years, it's about a 25% increase. We're getting a lot more money out there to the roads, including adding 3 positions that maintain the roads. So we've been taking a lot of steps and being very proactive in the gravel road battle.
And Mr. McCormick, would you answer the same question, please?
Sure. That's actually one of my other main objectives. It's kind of broad, but it's getting out ahead of problems before they become a crisis. And I see this secondary roads issue as a crisis, something that could have been alleviated had we directed the funds towards it many, many years ago. Unfortunately, there's plenty of folks that live out in the county that are experiencing a lot of trying times just getting to and from their residences. What I'd like to see is to be sure that in the future we are, like I say, getting out ahead of problems before they erupt and get to this point. Sometimes minor fixes can turn into nightmares over time.
Thank you. And Ms. Barnes, would you please direct your next question to Mr. McCormick?
Mr. McCormick, in regard to COVID-19, what do you think the greatest challenge to the county will be in the future? For instance, what about funding for Siouxland District Health?
Yeah, so funding for Siouxland District Health is an obvious one. That's a major priority. I think one of the biggest challenges is going to be getting our small business community back on track. That's a huge issue to me. I'm familiar with running a small business, and it's difficult even during good times of the economy. And so I think, to answer your question, the biggest issue that we're going to be having moving forward is just trying to do whatever we can to try and prop up and stabilize our small business community.
And Mr. Radig, would you answer the same question, please?
Sure thing. A lot of the challenge with COVID-19 is yet to be seen. It comes this November when we start to see where our sales tax receipts are, the casino revenue, and all these numbers that we were running off projections, and seeing the actual numbers could pose a challenge. We don't know where they're going to be, because we've heard anywhere from 30% less to maybe even worse. So as a county, when you budget off projections and then you get your actual numbers and there's quite a bit less, there's kind of a crisis that goes, then you start using your reserves. And he brought up a great point with the effect on small business. There's a lot of restaurants hurting, so I've been trying to do my best to eat out as much as possible lately. But I think, we as a community, if we work together and identify needs, that we can come together and we can be stronger through all of this in the end.
Thank you. And Ms. Weaver-Basie, would you direct your question to Mr. Radig?
Mr. Radig, how will you work to earn the trust of voters from the entire county?
Sure thing. I've worked very hard over my time in public service. As a supervisor, I've made it to almost every single city council meeting throughout Woodbury County. I made it to a lot of rural meetings and Farm Bureau, and just meeting with rural farmers to discuss where property taxes are. And I've seen a lot of the concerns that, people just don't want to pay more in taxes than they have to. People would like their gravel taken care of, and I think we've been doing our best to address that. And for the most part, when you talk to people out in the rural community in the county, they really want to be left alone and live their lives and not have government create some new rules or regulations for everything they do in their regular life. So I've had the back of the rural community. I'm much more of a person that doesn't see that I got to get my hands in everything and control everything. I let the community and the people live their lives, and I'll take care of business at the courthouse.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick?
Yeah, so far my entire campaign has been all about serving the entire population of Woodbury County. And early on, we started making trips to the smaller communities, and we visited every single one so far. And I've spoken with several people there, and in fact, they do feel like they're neglected at times. And that's something that I hate to see. And so I just want to guarantee the voters that I'll absolutely keep everybody in mind when it comes to making decisions. I also think that it's important to meet people where they live. I like the idea of reviving the rotating board meetings, going out to these smaller communities so that people can come and speak to them and speak if they choose. And that's something that I plan on bringing up if I'm elected, to see if we can get that going again. And if not, I'll just make it a point to do it myself.
Thank you. And Ms. Adamson, will you direct your question to Mr. McCormick, please?
Mr. McCormick, Woodbury County will soon have a new jail and a new sheriff, essentially starting off with a clean slate. How do you see the relationship between the Sheriff's Department and the Board of Supervisors developing?
Well, I know Chad Sheehan really, really well. He and I are friends. We've been friends for quite some time. I've worked with him. I know that he's a very good guy. He's got a big heart, and he's very intelligent. I think that it's going to be a smooth transition for him into the sheriff's office, and I think that just given what I know about him and how he works with people, I think that the relationship between the board and the sheriff's department will be a good one.
And Mr. Radig?
And I've been meeting a lot with Chad over the last few months, getting to know him quite well. I think Chad's a great guy. He'll make a great sheriff for Woodbury County, and I'm honored to be able to serve with him if I get that chance. I think, if you look at anything when you have two government, levels of government working with each other, sometimes you'll be at odds, but I've always done my best to make sure that I get along with whoever I'm serving with at the end of the day. And that's my promise to Woodbury County voters, and I'll keep that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Barnes, back to you. Would you direct your next question to Mr. Radig?
Mr. Radig, Woodbury County is asking for a little over $1.3 million in COVID cost reimbursement from the CARES Act. How do you intend to ensure that this reimbursement money is distributed fairly among the communities in the county?
Sure. The 1.3 million, initially, like I said, we don't know what our potential costs are going to be, so initially that 1.3 million should go into our reserve funds to secure those, and that way we know, what we're going to need and where we're going to need it. And then we'll have to go through kind of department by department to see who was affected the worst by the pandemic. Some departments will be affected more than others, and it'll really be a process essentially similar to the budgeting process, and I've been through that before, and it will be equitable to the extent that it can be. Some departments probably saw very little effect from COVID, and some maybe are doing better than they were before, but obviously the Sheriff's Department and District Health and a few others had a few more expenses or costs come up because of COVID.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick?
Yeah, and I think that Mr. Radig's correct in what he says. Unfortunately with COVID, there are a lot of question marks. There are a lot of unknowns, and so it's going to be difficult to determine who needs what and how much. I do think that health and safety are probably the two biggest priorities, and so certainly, like he had mentioned, Sheriff's Department and Siouxland District Health. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of ensuring that we've got open dialogue with all of the communities and agencies that we have in Woodbury County, and making sure that everybody's taken into account when the money starts to get distributed.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver-Bakesy, would you direct your next question to Mr. McCormick?
Mr. McCormick, have you ever attended a poverty simulation workshop or diversity training? And would you consider asking that such trainings be held for the supervisors and other county employees? Please explain.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. This one's kind of an interesting one for me because early on in my life, when I was 4 years old, my parents split up. My mom moved to Corpus Christi, Texas, and she struggled to make ends meet down there. I would go down every summer for 6 weeks, and we were living in poverty. We lived in Section 8 housing. We waited for food stamps to show up to put food in the refrigerator. It wasn't for the entire time, but it certainly was a good portion of my childhood. And so I've experienced it myself, and I'm very empathetic to folks that find themselves in those situations. To answer your question, I absolutely think that training would be awesome for county workers, anybody that's interested in learning what it's like to be impoverished. It's not a fun time.
Thank you. Mr. Radig?
Well, and I can go back to the 80s when I was a child, and my family took on the family farm, and in a time where it was almost considered child abuse to take on the family farm. And my dad lost his full-time job, so he was laid off for over a year. And we were actually kind of helped by the generosity of a lot of the other farmers in the area. Some of our meals at times were popcorn that was from the field, and we had a lot of frozen corn and a lot of frozen peas. And as a kid, honestly, I didn't realize, I thought that was just normal life, I thought popcorn was a pretty good supper. But, I can relate to a lot of people. I've had a lot of, minimum wage jobs in my life. A lot of times I've had to rely on friends. Obviously I've always worked hard and done the best I could to get to places where I can be. As far as the county, our HR department has had training in the past. It was through a computer type course. So.
Thank you. And Ms. Adamson, I think we have time for one more quick question before we have closing statements, so go ahead and direct your question to Mr. Radig.
For sure. Mr. Radig, do you feel the county has done enough regarding COVID health protocols countywide? And if not, is there anything more that they could do?
Yeah, I honestly think that the county's done, quite a bit as far as shoring up the building itself and, making sure that, temperatures were taken for a while. If anything, while people were not out and about, we were kind of over and above what a lot of other places were doing. And, as far as restrictions out in the county, I mean, what are we going to do? Tell guys in tractors they got to wear masks? No, it's, people have a right to live the way they want to live. And, if somebody wants to, live life without a mask, I'll defend that right. If somebody wants to wear their mask, I'll defend their right to wear their mask as well. And, that's what America's about. It's about freedom and choices. And, I feel like the counties took a very balanced approach to COVID-19.
And Mr. McCormick?
I think about this, and one of the things that I've done to kind of prepare myself for potentially being elected this position is having gone back and watched, the last 6 months of board meetings. And one thing that kind of struck me early on that I was that they weren't wearing any masks up on stage behind their podiums up there. And I think that, to me, I think in order to slow the spread, to stop the spread, wearing a mask is a simple thing to do. I agree with Mr. Radig wholeheartedly that everybody's free to decide what they want to do, but I think that it might have been advantageous from a leadership perspective to maybe be wearing masks while attending the board meetings, just to show that we're supporting the cause and trying to slow the spread a little bit.
Thank you. We will now allow each candidate to make a 1-minute closing statement. And Mr. Radig, since we started with Mr. McCormick last time, we'll start with you this time.
Sounds great. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into this forum. I would also like to thank the voters that have trusted me to serve you over the last 4 years. Again, priority number 1 will always be the budget and keeping tax levies down. Number 2, I'd like to encourage affordable housing development throughout our bedroom communities in Woodbury County. Finally, I'll continue to make economic development a priority. See, Woodbury County has a lot of challenges to development, and we need to identify those challenges and overcome them. And speaking of challenges, we faced a lot of challenges over the last 4 years, from mental health mandates, flooding in Hornick, loss of paramedic services, a failing jail, and a COVID-19 pandemic. We overcame these challenges and continue to overcome these challenges by working together. I can proudly say that as supervisor, Woodbury County is better off now than what it was 4 years ago. And as your supervisor, I have kept my promises, and I would like to continue fighting for you, the taxpayer, and I ask for your vote on November 3rd. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. McCormick?
When it comes to the county supervisor position, many people will argue that there is no greater level of government that has a greater impact on our daily lives, the type of community that we live in, the type of community that we leave our children. And that's why it's so important to choose the right person for the job. You want someone focused, I think, number 1, on constituent service. That is somebody who will actively solicit information, input from constituents that are important to them, and then actively take steps to resolve those issues. You also want someone who shares your same values like honesty, integrity, and work ethic, some of my core values. As county supervisor, I can guarantee you that you will be at the heart of every decision that I make. If elected, I promise to do everything that I can to make Woodbury County an even better place to live, work, play, and stay. I ask for your vote this November. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for attending this evening. We appreciate your willingness to serve our county and our citizens, and we appreciate your participation in this forum this evening. So thank you both very much. We will have a brief intermission here of sorts as we switch over so that we can have the candidates for District 3. They will be coming into the studio and taking their places as these gentlemen are leaving. So we ask you to bear with us for just a few minutes. You guys will hear that again.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome back to the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors Candidate Forum, brought to you by the League of Women Voters and co-sponsored by the Witt Community College Mass Media Program and the Witt Community College Journalist Program. Joining me tonight are our panelists, Kristen Barnes, Teresa Weaver-Basie, and Hannah Adamson. And we are now moving on to part 2 with our District 3 candidates, Jeremy Taylor, who is a Republican, and Marty Potabon for the Democrats. The forum, for those of you who are just joining us, will consist of opening statements by each of the candidates that are 1 minute in length. We will then turn to our panelists, who will be asking questions in turn. We will alternate which candidate goes first. They will each have 1 minute to answer the same question, and then we will move on to the next panelist for another question. At the end of the question segments, we will allow each candidate to give a 1 minute closing statement. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for your willingness to serve our county. We're going to start with Mr. Potabon. If you would give your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and Western Iowa Tech for doing this. I just want to give a little history. I was born 13th of 15 kids in Remsen, Iowa. We moved to Sioux City when I was 2, and my parents taught me some valuable lessons growing up. And the first one is to give back to your community. And I've always decided that public service was my way of giving back. After I got out of the Army, I spent 18 years on the Sioux City Police Department. After an injury forced me to take a retirement, I got on the Sioux City City Council and on the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors. And I also serve as trustee for the State Police and Fire Pension Board. And I think that's part of my way of giving back. And I see all elected offices as public service. I work for the candidates. I'm not an I guy, I'm a we guy. And I think the board works as a team, and I think I'm a very good team member, and I'd like to continue doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor.
Well, thank you so much to the League and to Western Iowa Tech for hosting this forum tonight. I grew up here in Sioux City, and this is my hometown right here in Woodbury County, and I'm the son of 2 lifelong educators who also taught me that service was something that you are expected to give back to. And so I not only was student council president at West High, but moved on to the legislature and was twice elected to the County Board of Supervisors. I'm running in District 3 after a residency change in which hindsight's 2020 might have handled differently, but I'm passionate about this community. I'm passionate because I have much left to give to improve county government, and I want to see the progress that we made the past 5 years continue. And frankly, I was asked to run, saying that we can do better from this district and that we can continue the progress to lower taxes, to partner with our business community, and to make sure that we can continue to serve the people and the working families of Woodbury County.
Thank you. We're now going to turn to our panelists, and we're going to start with Hannah Adamson, who's the KCAU-9 news anchor. I should mention that KCAU-9 is also hosting us on their website, so you can tune in to watch the video there as well as the Western Iowa Tech TV website. So thank you for participating, and then go ahead and ask your first question, Ms. Adamson, and we'll direct your first question to Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, one of the biggest projects in the works for the county is the $50 million Woodbury County Law Enforcement Center. Are you happy with the way the project is moving forward, and would you have done or do anything differently?
I am happy with the way that the project is moving forward. I would like to say that this started with looking at long-term planning, and that was something that for 30 years went by the wayside, which is the reason that we had a jail that was built in 1987 for 90 inmates, now in disrepair. We have to make sure that we have long-term facility plans in all of our facilities. The county jail needs to be built right, and so I sat and actually formed the committee to have that kind of oversight. And by doing so, we identified with a project management group that ultimately we would need this $50 million jail. I'll also make sure that we have taxpayer protections and provisions that if federal inmate revenue isn't timely and doesn't come in, that we protect taxpayers and working families. That's very critical. Otherwise, it will be one of the most massive tax increases that the county has seen. And so with that, I am happy with the progress thus far, but it's going to take the kind of oversight that was lacking the 3 decades previous to us taking the board in 2015.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Potabon, will you answer the same question, please?
Yeah, I'm happy with the way it's going forward. back in 87, actually 85 through 87, when I was on the police department, I was on what they called the Labor Management Committee, and we were looking at building a joint city-county facility, which to this day I still wish had happened. Unfortunately, at that time, politics got in the way. We had a sheriff and a chief of police who didn't like each other. Therefore, they wouldn't cooperate with it. So instead of having what we have now, where we have a 30-year-old building that should still be standing, but it's worthless because of poor management and politics getting in the way. During the building of our current jail, they decided to cut some funds during the construction. It was designed to be able to build up 2 stories up. Well, that couldn't happen because they saved money during the construction and didn't go as far down with the footings as they would have had to save short-term money at that time, which is now costing us $50 million. But I am happy the way it's going forward. I just want to see that we stay under budget and that we do it right this time and the politics don't get involved.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver-Basie, will you please direct your next question to Mr. Potabon?
Mr. Potabom, if elected, what are your top 3 priorities?
My top 3, the first one is one when I came on this board that I wanted to see, and that's to fix the roads out in the county. The gravel roads are terrible. During the spring, nobody can drive on them. We have school buses trying to get that have to take detours around them. And I want to make sure we get that done. Unfortunately, right now it's being stalled in the courts, so we can't get the project going that we have. My second one we've talked about is the jail, to make sure that it gets done right, not politically, but it gets done and we let the experts build it the way they should, and that we watch the money to make sure that we come in under budget. And the third one I'd like to do is just to make sure that we understand that the county board is a board of team. It's a group of people that work together to do things. I think county is right now in a pretty good spot. I think we've moved pretty well forward, and I'd like to see that continue by having the teamwork on the board.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
3 priorities. First, we need to have high-quality services with a pro-growth agenda. There's a reason that I've been endorsed by the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce. They knew coming into 2015 that they needed someone who was going to cooperate with the business community. And so I've done so in terms of seeking to lower the tax levy, and that's happened a record 4 years in a row. The second one is lower taxes on working families. We're in a time of instability. And so making sure that families have more in their budget is critical. I put forward plans time and again, including $28 million in property tax relief the next 20 years. And county roads and long-term plans are critical as well. This is where I believe my opponent and I are different. He's put one item on in over 150 meetings, and it would have increased property taxes to the tune of over $10 million. That was the solution. We rejected that as a board, and we actually have a plan to borrow against future CF revenue. That was my plan that was put forward and supported on the board, and we need to be able to create these high-quality services and yet keep the levy low.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
Ms. Barnes, would you please direct your question to Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Taylor, how would you oversee the operation of the new jail to ensure that the ongoing balance between facility maintenance and operations compared to other priorities in the budget?
I think it's critical to have communication. That's why I came forward with a long-term facilities plan. We brought in a project management group, and they identified things all over our county buildings. We became the first all-LED lit county in the state of Iowa from those long-term facility plans. We closed Prairie Hills, which was set to cost $1.2 million in energy waste over the next 10 years' time. We moved the kitchen down to the jail. These challenges and issues come up on a daily basis right now in this 1987 facility. We need to have labor management meetings. That's something that had gone by the wayside when I was chair in 2016. We met with CWA, the Correctional Officers Union, who endorsed me in 2014 and 2018 because they know that I communicate well. And so we need to identify the needs that are going on currently and to make sure that we are planning for the future in a long-term and productive manner.
Thank you. Mr. Potabon?
What we need to do with the jail, first of all, like I talked earlier, is during the construction is to make sure it gets done right, keep the politics out of it. And after that, it's going to take teamwork. It's going to take teamwork between the board, the sheriff, who is an elected official, will be basically running the facility, and the employees that work there. We have to make sure that everybody's on the same team. Like I said before, I'm a we guy, I'm not an I guy. And I don't care who gets the credit. I want to make sure that we get this thing up, we get it done right. I spent 18 years in law enforcement. The need for a new jail is tragic right now because we're holding our breath that nothing happens to the old facility while we try to get this new one built. But the main thing is we have to have the teamwork in order to keep it going. The new sheriff, Chad Sheehan, is a great guy. I think he'll do a terrific job. And I guess he's not the new sheriff yet, but he will be here soon. And I think he'll work well with the board. I know how cooperative Chad can be, and I think it'll be a good management team between everybody working together.
Thank you. And Ms. Adamson, will you please direct your question to Mr. Potabon?
So, Mr. Potabom, considering that county road and gravel road projects could cost the county millions of dollars over the next several years, where is the county at regarding those roads that need to be fixed? And if elected, how would you move things forward?
We're trying to move it forward as quickly as we can. That was a program that was going to start this year. We were going to sell the bonds based on the revenue from the TIF district. Unfortunately, there was a lawsuit filed. The Sergeant Bluff Luton School District filed a suit against the board telling us that we can't use TIF money for that in the way we are. We disagree with that, of course, as in most lawsuits. The two sides don't agree on what's going on. But that court case isn't going to come up till January. So this whole year, this year that we had started, that we'd hoped to be putting gravel down, will be wasted. Hopefully we'll get it going next year. Our engineer says it's going to take him 5 years. I've talked to him several times. I told him I said 3. I'm hoping we get a good compromise and that we will make up the 1 year that we're losing this year, because they're terrible and they need to be fixed, and they need to be fixed now. But unfortunately, legality got in the way and we have to wait till the lawsuit is finished.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
So I agree with Mr. Potabom on the assessment of where we're at right now. So I'll move past that to the spring thaw the year before last was one of the worst on record. We were responsive to our county rural residents. I put forward a plan, again, that the board supported, which dedicated $6.7 million of minimum valuation, which will come online through CF Industries revenue. The board supported that. Mr. Potabom came forward again with what would have been a $10 million property tax increase paid by county residents over 5 years' time. It would have been the largest property tax increase in 30 years. We rejected that. The next week, I came back and I proposed borrowing not against property taxpayers, who are already strapped too much at this point, but against future CF Industries revenue, which is going to come online at about $56 million over the next 20 years. The board supported that measure. That, again, is something I would differentiate, is that we need leadership, we need solutions, instead of going back to property taxpayers yet again.
Thank you. And we'll go to Ms. Weaver-Basie, and will you please direct your question to Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Taylor, how will you work to earn the trust of the voters from the entire county?
I think by doing what I've done over the last 5 years, by being responsive. When we came into office, I worked in a bipartisan way with a great Democrat, Mark Monson, with Matthew Ung, and we answered the call for change from the Taxpayers Research Conference, from the Journal, for those who were looking for a change in county government. One of the many things that we initiated was moving meeting times so that more people could come after work, live streaming them on YouTube, as I'm thankful you're doing today, meeting in every rural area as we did under my chairmanship in 2016. And we also are responsive to our county residents in the rural areas. When Siouxland paramedics went away, there was the old either-or adage of either increase property taxes or lose paramedic coverage. I said there's a third and another way. And so we looked at our other areas, we reduced FTEs elsewhere, and today we have countywide paramedic coverage for our rural residents. That, again, is something I led on, and I'm proud to have supported.
Thank you.
Well, the first thing I would say to get the trust of the residents, never lie to them. And that'll never happen out of my mouth. One of the things my parents taught me is you don't lie to people. And I won't do that. The other thing is to make sure that everybody knows that there's an open and honest and transparent dialogue going on. And I've talked to a lot of the residents in the county, either one-on-one or in groups, and we're trying to make this all a team effort, and part of that team involves the citizens. That's who we work for. We're elected by the citizens. That's who we work for. That's who pays us. And if we're not willing to work with them, then we've lost them already. But the main thing, like I said, was always work with them. They have to know that when we talk to them, that what we're telling them is the truth, and I would never lie to the citizens in Woodbury County.
Thank you. Ms. Barnes, will you direct your question to Mr. Potabom, please?
Mr. Potabom, in regard to COVID-19, what do you think the greatest challenge to the county will be in the future? For instance, what about the funding of Siouxland District Health?
I think COVID-19 is going to give a lot of challenges to a lot of different government agencies. Siouxland District Health, first of all, is doing a great job. We've met with Kevin quite often. He comes in and talks to our board meetings. But I think the biggest thing about COVID is we don't know for sure yet what's going to happen with the tax askings. We'll find that out in November because businesses are hurting. They're out there hurting, and we don't know for sure how that's going to affect the county. We did just get lucky, got a little over $1 million in the CARES Act money, which we decided to put right into our fund off to the side so that we don't use it unless we absolutely need it. It's sort of like when you budget at home. You don't budget for all your wants, you budget for your needs, and then you work from there. But COVID is just a unique animal that we're going to all have to go forward from, and it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
Marty and I don't agree on everything, but we do agree on this. Kevin Green does a great job. Siouxland District Health is doing great yeoman's work in this effort. And so I think that therein lies our greatest challenge is Siouxland District Health, their amount of funding, and the focus that they're likely having to take from other areas. They do everything from well to restaurant inspections to keeping this community safe in a way that is really behind the scenes. But I think one of the best kept secrets. So we're going to have to look at their funding. We're going to have to look at stability for small businesses and working families. One of the things that I put forward that I think is going to be critical, we have all of these needs, a $50 million jail, $10 million or more on the county roads. We have other courthouse infrastructure projects. That's going to take a lot of money. One of the things that we have to keep in mind is where is that money coming from? It's coming from taxpayers. My plan dedicates $28 million of CF Industries revenue to property tax relief, and I believe that will help small businesses and working families also have stability during these challenging times.
Thank you. Ms. Adamson, will you please direct your question to Mr. Taylor?
Well, Mr. Taylor, going back on a prior question, Woodbury County will soon have a new jail and a new sheriff, essentially starting off on a clean slate. How do you see the relationship between the Sheriff's Department and the Board of Supervisors developing?
I think very well. I have long admired Chad Sheehan. We actually worked together at North High School where he was a liaison officer and I was a teacher. This is one of the problems pre-2015. If you remember, my opponent had attempted to unseat Sheriff Dave Drew. After being unsuccessful, the board at that time appointed him in charge of courthouse security. We ran, in no small part, on returning that to the sheriff's office. We thought it was the wrong thing to do, wrong thing to be a part of. Once we have established a good relationship with our sheriff, which I have with Sheriff Dave Drew and would plan to have with Sheriff Chad Sheehan, we need to listen. He's an elected official, elected separately from us, and he needs to let us know what funding needs he has. I've been very proud to have been a part of adding necessary jail equipment for our correctional officers, of supporting our law enforcement by making sure that their families are covered during a line of duty death, and making sure that I have a good communicative, cooperative relationship with our sheriff, which I would plan to continue to do.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Potabom?
Well, the good thing is we're going to be able to work together with no problem. First of all, I worked with both Sheriff Drew and Sheriff Sheehan when I was on the police department. And I hate to give the difference from our ages, but Mr. Sheehan was a student at East when I was the liaison officer out there. So I've known Chad for a long time. And I don't think there'll be any problem with work relations, just like there isn't with Sheriff Drew. Dave was one of my good friends, and we've been friends for years, and we've never let politics get in the middle of that, nor will we ever, at least from my side, and I'm sure Dave's the same way. But I think it's going to be a good team. I think, I keep on calling him Officer Sheehan, it's Chad Sheehan, Sheriff Sheehan, is a great communicator. He's a good problem solver, and I think he'll just be a very valuable asset to the team, and it'll be a team. And that's the good thing, is I know that we can all work together, and we can do what we need to do for the good of the citizens out in the county, because again, that's who we work for, is the people that pay the taxes.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver-Basie, would you please direct your next question to Mr. Potabom?
Mr. Potabom, have you ever attended a diversity training or poverty simulation workshop? And would you consider asking that such trainings be held for the supervisors and other county employees? Please explain.
It was under a different name back when I attended. When I was on the police department, we had training and how to work with different groups. That was a long time ago, and the world has changed since then. So yes, I would absolutely support having that training for all all employees of the county, especially in the world we live in today. With the divisiveness that we have now, I think anything we can do to learn about what people who are different from us are having to do and what they have to put up with is going to be nothing but beneficial, both to our employees and to the citizens of Woodbury County. So I would be supportive, and I think it should start with the supervisors. I think it'd be a valuable training both for the poverty and for the ethnicity to have training that we know what people are going through. Because a lot of times, you know, you may hear about the problems, but you really don't know what the problems are until you get a chance to sit down and have an open, honest communication with them. So I would definitely support those.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
Potentially. I have gone through some diversity training as a younger man in life. I haven't done the poverty simulation, but I lived in Vietnam with a family of 11, so I feel like I've lived it rather than simulating it. So with that, I do believe any experience or training that we can provide that increases collaboration and communication is very valuable. When we came into what I call the new board in 2015, answering those calls for changes, training was something that we put a high priority on, from providing that and funding for the sheriff's office when needed to evaluating our department heads and performance reviews, which had gone by the wayside. So I'm very much a fan of making sure that we have professional development, department head meetings. We borrowed from the school district on their way of professional communications. And so any training that improves our county employees is something that I would be supportive of.
Thank you. And Ms. Barnes, would you direct your question to Mr. Taylor, please?
Mr. Taylor, Woodbury County is asking for a little over $1.3 million in COVID cost reimbursement for the CARES Act. How do you intend to ensure that this reimbursement money is distributed fairly among the communities in the county?
It's a great question. So I think that we need to make sure that those who are the purveyors of those funds, if those go through Siouxland District Health, they have their own separately diverse elected board of folks, of which one member of the Board of Supervisors sits. So I think making sure that we're adhering to any state and federal guidelines is very important. I think that making sure that we are really putting the funds to where they're most needed, whether that's in health coverage costs or in making sure that we have increased testing. Also looking at ways that we can educate the public. That's something that Siouxland District Health does a great job of. Whether that's through their regular communications, I just received their newsletter yesterday, or through educating our leaders, whether it's in the school system or the private sector. I can remember Kevin Green sitting down with Chris McGowan and having a shared forum, those being shared virtually. So I think having those public-private partnerships, making sure Siouxland District Health has that oversight, and that we look at where it's best and most appropriate to be funded.
Thank you. Mr. Potabom?
Yeah, and I agree with a lot what he said, because that money, like I said before, we don't know what the tax askings are going to come in, the revenues are going to come in November. So that money shouldn't be just handed out. It's got to be any department head or elected official that actually has something they need because of the COVID should be able to come forward and ask for it, and that's how we should divide that up. It's not going to be just a wish list. Okay, I want to add to my budget for any of the elected officials. Actually, we've already contacted them all and told them that this money is not going to be just evenly distributed and everybody gets a percentage. It's going to be put on a as needed basis. But we're going to wait and see what the county's situation is before any of that money starts to get divided up, because we don't know for sure where it's going to be needed. Like you was talking about, district health may need more than, say, the sheriff's department does. So we're going to have to wait and see and then divide it up on a need basis.
Thank you. Ms. Adamson, will you please direct your question to Mr. Potabom?
Mr. Potabom, do you feel the county has done enough regarding COVID health protocols? And if not, what more could they possibly do?
Personally, no, I don't think we have. First of all, because of the governor's proclamation, we're kind of handcuffed in what we can do. But I've asked earlier on, I thought we should have had a mask mandate at the courthouse. Some of the elected officials do. And you'll see at the meetings, I wear mine, simply because we're nowhere near 6 feet apart up there at our table. Everybody in the crowd has to be 6 feet, but we're not. So I think, especially when you're looking at leaders and when you're in a pandemic like we are now, The citizens look to the leaders to see what direction you're going to go. And if we're given a bad example from our spot, I don't think it comes out right. But I think the city council, I think, did a good thing. They did as far as they could when they passed the resolution encouraging people to wear masks, because you can't put any more teeth in it than that. But I think something along that line, or like I said, I would have preferred a mask mandate in the courthouse for anyone coming in to be wearing one.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I think the county's done a very good job in utilizing the resources that they have at this point. Again, Siouxland District Health has done great work in terms of really keeping the public up to date with what can be done. So I don't have any things that I would point to that the county should have done this or done that differently in terms of Siouxland District Health's response. In terms of mandating outside in public areas, I know that that's been a push and pull between different municipalities, counties, and the governor's office. I'm not someone who is asking for countywide and public spaces especially, but I do believe that where it's applicable, we can't socially distance, then we do need to lead by example and to be helpful and protective.
Thank you. We will now have time for our closing statements, and you each have 1 minute to give a closing statement. Mr. Taylor, since Mr. Potabom went first at the opening, you can go first on the closing.
Well, thank you very much for having us here tonight and for this opportunity. I believe that this is about hard work, real results, and leadership. That's why I stepped forward, and that's why I've received the support of the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce, many of our rural mayors who know that I'll work hard for them, and working families. When I see an issue or a problem, I step forward and want to serve. So for example, when a law enforcement officer lost his life in the line of duty, and I found out his family's health insurance coverage would be lost, I stepped forward. And today, no Woodbury County officer or deputy who loses his or her life in the line of duty will have the family's health insurance gone. So I step forward. I want to lead in long-term planning. I want to have that spirit of cooperation that's so important with the city and with the business community. That's how we are starting to grow right now. There's much left to be done, and for me, it's about service. That's what's brought me into the chaplaincy, into the Army National Guard, and as somebody who's a father of 6 kids and a wonderful wife, I want to give back to my hometown and to continue to serve and lead, and would be honored to have your support.
Thank you. Mr. Potabom?
Thank you very much. And again, I want to thank you for having us out here. I appreciate this. The one thing I want to put up, and I said it in my opening statement, I believe that elected officials are public servants and that this is public service. And that's what my whole adult life has been, is public service. I want to make sure that we work as a team. Like I said, I'm not an I guy, I'm a we guy. I want to see results, and I don't care who gets credit for them. I just want to see the results get done. And the one thing I'll always promise, and I said it a couple times here tonight to the citizens of Woodbury County, is if you ask me a question, I will never lie to you. What I tell you will be honest, transparent, and I'll tell you the truth. We may not always agree, and that's the one good thing about politics locally compared to some of our national things, is that we can disagree and hopefully do it in a professional manner. But that's all I want to tell the people in the county is I'll work hard for you and I'll never lie to you. And I appreciate your vote on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for being here. Thank you for participating in our forum, and thank you most of all for your service to our community. We appreciate your willingness to serve. We will now have a brief intermission once again as we switch over from our District 3 candidates to our District 5 candidates. And we hope that you will join us for the final segment of our debate after about a 10-minute break. Thank you. Teresa takes care of it.
I gotta get those out of there before I come in charge of pictures.
So what are we gonna? welcome back for the final segment of tonight's Woodbury County Board of Supervisors Candidate Forum, brought to you by the League of Women Voters in conjunction with Western Iowa Tech Community College Mass Media Program and Western Iowa Tech Community College Journalism Program. In addition, KCAU Siouxland Proud website is also airing this, and both KCAU and WIT TV will have this on their websites until the election, so thank you all for your cooperation in making this happen. We have with us now for the District 5 representatives running for office, we have Republican Rocky DeWitt and Democrat Patty Erickson Putnam. Our forum panelists tonight are Teresa Weaver Basie from the League of Women Voters, Kristen Barnes from Western Iowa Tech Community College Mass Media Program, and Hannah Adamson from KCAU 9 News. Thank you for being here and for sticking around for all three segments here. We are going to be following the same format that we followed for the previous two segments, so each of our candidates will have 1 minute to give an opening statement. After that, we will be turning to our panelists, who will be taking turns asking questions. Each of you will have 60 seconds to answer each question, and we will alternate who goes first. Okay? So, Patty Erickson Putnam, we're going to start with you, and you have 60 seconds to give an opening statement.
My name is Patty Erickson Putnam. I'm happy to be here this evening. I want to thank the League for continuing this with the challenges with COVID-19. My background is in local government. I've worked through either Simcoe or Woodbury County for the past 35 years and worked with various offices and departments from law enforcement to courthouse restoration. Over the course of about those 35 years, I've brought in about $10 million in federal grant money for a variety of purposes. So I'm well aware of federal, state guidelines and requirements for grant administration. Writing grants just gave me an opportunity to learn and continue to learn over the various functions in government. So, you know, I now live on a farm outside Pearson, Iowa with my husband, and we've been married for 36 years.
Thank you. Rocky DeWitt, would you please give us your 60-second opening statement?
I'm Rocky DeWitt, running for re-election for my second term for Woodbury County Supervisor. It's been a steep learning curve. I've enjoyed every minute of it. There's been some challenges, obviously. I'm looking forward to the next 4 years. We've made a lot of progress with the law enforcement center, the bond issue. We've come a long ways with secondary roads. We've had a lot of things dumped in our lap that I think were overlooked or misunderstood for the last 30 plus years, and we're doing what we can to put this back together. We want this county to move forward. We want more job growth. We want lower tax levies, and we're after what's right for Woodbury County. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are now going to turn to our panelists to ask their questions. And we're going to start with Ms. Barnes down at the end there. If you would direct your first question to Mr. DeWitt.
Mr. DeWitt, how would you oversee the operation of the new jail to ensure that the ongoing balance between facility maintenance and operations compared to other priorities in the budget?
You know, I sit on the LEC authority as well as the Board of Supervisors, so the authority does have jurisdiction over that building, that structure, for 20 years, or until the bond issue is retired and or the LEC authority is dissolved as well. The authority will have complete control over that. There's already mechanisms in place to have 20% of the money that comes in as revenue to go towards building maintenance, and the other 80% will go towards buying down the bonds, getting the debt paid off.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson Putnam, would you answer the same question, please?
Well, the LEC being an authority, that's the first time the authority has been used for a project this large. So I think everybody's going to be learning as they go along. You know, resting on the income for federal prisoners, I think, is something that's going to have to be played out. I think there's some real questions there as to number of federal prisoners, and are they going to contract for a specific number and then pay that specific number, whether or not they use those beds. I'm not sure on how that's going to be handled. I did serve on the previous Law Enforcement Center new construction committee quite some time ago, and that was just resoundingly defeated by Woodbury County taxpayers. So glad to see it. It's been necessary for a long time, and we'll go forward from there and learn and make it the best we can.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver-Basie, will you please direct your question to Ms. Erickson Putnam?
Ms. Erickson Putnam, if elected, what are your top 3 priorities?
My top 3 priorities, I was hired by Woodbury County originally to implement a case management program for mentally disabled individuals with developmental disabilities, chronic mental illness, or now it's called developmental disabilities again. So that was my priority coming in, and then to shape a system that was responsive to disabled population needs. So my first 2 priorities are kind of intertwined. They're going to be restoring and assuring the fiscal stability for mental health services and assuring equitable services for mental health and disability services needs for Woodbury County people. Going into the region, I think that has created some unique problems, and they need to be addressed.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
My first 3 priorities are going to be to make sure that the LEC is finished under budget if possible, or at least in budget. Secondary roads, we want to make sure that that project is done. It was 30-plus years in the making. It's not going to get fixed overnight, but we're already making steps to go forward with that. Obviously, we all want lower tax levies to keep property taxes as low as we can possibly make them without dropping services. That is huge. We have been a huge proponent of cutting costs without cutting services. I disagree with my opponent on the mental health region. We've had nothing but kudos and improved services from where I sit on the government's board. Rolling Hills has been a smashing success.
Thank you. Ms. Adamson, will you please direct your first question to Mr. DeWitt?
Mr. DeWitt, considering that county road and gravel road projects could cost the county millions of dollars over the next 5 years, where is the county at regarding those roads that need to be fixed? And if elected, how would you move things forward?
We're already moving forward on getting some of the problem areas resolved. In fact, there's a couple of areas down by Hornick and Smithland that have been just true problem children for years. The base has been gone. Down there in the Les Hills area, the soil is obviously different than it is elsewhere in the county, but we've come a long ways already with getting some of the worst problem areas fixed. Again, that money is going to be coming in. We're going to be getting those problems taken care of. This was a long time in the making. It's not going to get fixed overnight, but we want to make sure that it is done right, and we go forward fixing every mile that needs it, and going back to the standard of maintaining every mile of every road every year.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson Putnam?
I live on those gravel roads out there, so I'm well aware of what condition they're in. And I think Secondary Roads does an absolutely fantastic job given what they've been given to deal with. I know the base on some of them are gone, but I think the board has another problem in that I know there have been farmers that have invited board members out to see their operations and really review. I only know of one board member that has ever gone out and accepted that invitation. And farming now is a corporate type of deal. So the size of the equipment going to track corn, going to the big corn wagons coming in that are on tracks that carry 700 bushels of corn or any kind of grain. And one gentleman out there does, 1,000 semis in and out of his place a year. That is considerable wear and tear, and I hope we can address that.
Thank you. Ms. Barnes, would you please direct your question to Ms. Erickson Putnam?
Ms. Erickson Putnam, In regard to COVID-19, what do you think the greatest challenge to the county will be in the future? For instance, what about funding for Siouxland District Health?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah. In regard to COVID-19, what do you think the greatest challenge to the county will be in the future? For instance, what about funding for Siouxland District Health?
Well, I think right now COVID-19 has to be kept control of, and we need to participate highly in that, in those recommendations for masking and social distancing as well as frequent cleaning. Siouxland District Health has been a great organization for a long time for Woodbury County, and I think those needs need to be addressed and looked at. If there's a problem area, they need to be able to bring it before the board and be assured that the board is going to listen to them and proceed on what needs to be done to keep everybody as safe as possible.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
Siouxland District Health has its own budget. They have their leadership in place. I think Siouxland District Health has been exemplary in providing, guidance, insight, progress, things to do, things to be involved in. But going forward, I am obviously concerned about something that's more contagious, more deadly, what have you, than C-19 has been. I think we're in for a new awakening, perhaps, on what some of these communicable diseases are going to be. But I also believe that Siouxland District Health is at the forefront in our area for keeping things moving forward.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver-Basie, would you please direct your question to Mr. DeWitt?
Mr. DeWitt, how will you work to earn the trust of voters from the entire county?
That's interesting because I've already been endorsed by the Western Iowa Labor Federation, Carpenters Local 948, as well as the Good Government Committee from the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce. I have worked with almost all of the mayors in the county. I've worked on several issues individually and as groups with various citizens and town halls, that sort of thing. I've worked with businesses large and small. I have worked with the sheriff's office. I've worked with secondary roads. I have been out on those roads with the engineer and others, and I think I have that rapport. I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a gravel road. I know what it's like to live out there. So I've also been involved in business, small and large, in this tri-state area. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson-Putman?
Well, I've written grants that have included the law enforcement, Sioux City Police Department, communications, a wide variety of operations. I've worked with all those departments. I've benefited from secondary roads when, we have to be served out there. I do think that the board does go out and meet with small communities, but the problem area may be where they can build another level of trust factor and relationship isn't going out and seeing those farming operations. The face of agriculture has changed, and even though 80% of the population within Woodbury County is in the Sioux City metro area and communities, I think they need to touch base with those farmers out there and get their input and their ideals. Ag is a huge business. It needs to be recognized as such.
Thank you. Ms. Adamson, will you please direct your question to Ms. Erickson-Putman?
Ms. Erickson-Putman, Woodbury County will soon have a new jail and a new sheriff, essentially starting off with a clean slate. How do you see the relationship between the Sheriff's Department and the Board of Supervisors developing?
Well, again, I'm not real clear on how the authority is and how that will be developed, but I've worked over the years with the Sheriff's Office. I'm familiar with, different construction mechanisms for law enforcement centers, whether it's linear or pod or direct supervision, so I'm familiar with those things. My biggest concern there is that we have a mental health court, an existing mental health court. It was the first one in the state of Iowa. We need to be assured that that mental health court is going to continue forward and provide the impact and the quality of life and improvements to individuals, that being mentally ill is not a crime, okay? So we need to make sure that we continue to work with that effort there to make sure that our mentally ill are not jailed and incarcerated. I know the guys don't want it. Don't want to jail people with mental illness. Let me clarify that. So that's one of my biggest concerns, and I would really have to look and see how the authority relates to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Woodbury County will soon have a new jail and a new sheriff, essentially starting off with a clean slate. How do you see the relationship between the Sheriff's Department and the Board of Supervisors developing?
I've already been in contact with candidate Sheehan. I've known his parents for years, which is of no importance, but I've known the family for a long time. I think moving forward, he's going to have a learning curve as well. Coming from the police department, sheriff's office is an entirely different animal than a PD. But I think he's going to have, Chad has been attending some of the meetings for the LEC Authority, and he's becoming acquainted with it. He's been in contact with Chairman Wick and I at least a couple of times on asking questions and being involved. So I think the transition should be pretty smooth, and we've had pretty good rapport between the board and the sheriff's office anyway, so I think we're just got to bring Mr. Sheehan up to speed, and I think all will be fine.
Thank you. Ms. Barnes, would you please direct your question to Mr. DeWitt?
Mr. DeWitt, Woodbury County is asking for a little over $1.3 million in COVID cost reimbursement from the CARES Act. How do you intend to ensure that this reimbursement money is distributed fairly among the communities in the county?
I haven't heard much of askings for them to be distributed throughout the county yet. For the time being, the board plans to put that money into reserves. Our general fund is a little bit lower than we'd like it to be for the reserve funding. So for the time being, we plan on putting that $1 million and change in reserves to keep that build up. Obviously, with the COVID issues coming too, is there's probably going to be, if not already has been, some increase in the tax abatements. Tax payments. The withholding of the property taxes due to hardships. So we're going to need to have some money to rely on going forward to make sure that we can keep the government going, the county government in place and moving.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson Putnam, will you please answer the same question?
Could we have the question repeated, please?
Sure.
Woodbury County is asking for a little over $1.3 million in COVID cost reimbursement from the CARES Act. How do you intend to ensure that this reimbursement money is distributed fairly among the communities in the county?
I'm going to assume that they had to have some kind of statistics and data to submit and request that $1.3 million, especially if it's, being delivered as a reimbursement type payment to the county. So there, I think you just need to sit there and you have to look at what was your data submitted to the feds for that reimbursement, and how can you prorate that out if it's not already been done so.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver-Basie, will you please direct your question to Ms. Erickson Putnam?
Ms. Erickson Putnam, have you ever attended a poverty simulation workshop or diversity training, and would you consider asking that such trainings be held for the supervisors and other county employees? And please explain.
I have not ever attended either one of those two items. I'm a licensed social worker for the, and I've attended a number of trainings that way. But yes, I think both of them would be critical right now, this time and place. It's all about understanding and knowing and changing our behavior and being supportive and going forward.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
I have not attended those type of trainings. I have been through various trainings, obviously sexual harassment, both as an employee and as a manager. Dozens of safety, other issue type of trainings that go along with that. I have not been to a diversity training. I will put it as bluntly as I can. I am not opposed to diversity training, but the county is a unique animal in that we have the Board of Supervisors responsible for X amount of employees, and then we have 4 more elected officials. I would like to see each individual elected sheriff, county attorney, and treasurer, and so on, that they pick their own diversity training because of their employees, because of their standard set of needs. And going forward, if we're going to adopt any diversity training, I want to have some insight. I don't want to just grab the first training that comes along and say that this is what we're going to go with. I want to be involved in that selection for training.
Thank you. Ms. Adamson, will you please direct your question to Mr. DeWitt?
Mr. DeWitt, do you feel the county has done enough regarding COVID health protocols? And if not, what more could they do?
I think the county has been over and above on what they need to do in both dealing with the C-19 issue and keeping the courthouse open. The treasurer's office, once again, is an autonomous office, and that he is elected. He did opt to close his office for a short time, I believe at 2 different occasions. That is up to him. That is up to the treasurer. We did our level best to keep all of the courthouse open as much as possible, but you have to remember that the courthouse has 3 different entities, city, county, and state. So we were dealing with a lot of different issues. The court system, for the most part, shut down except for emergency services like domestic abuse, mental health, things like that. But we kept the auditor's office, the board office was open the whole time. We did do masks, we did do sanitizing. The cleaning crew at night is sanitizing just nearly every surface in the courthouse. And going forward, I don't see any change in that. I think we're doing what we can with what we've got.
And Ms. Erickson-Putman?
I visited the courthouse over the course of time here that COVID has been there, and I've been impressed with the way that they have been handling it. The county employees, you give them a charge and they complete it, is what I've found over the years. So I've been impressed with what they've done. They've kept things open. They've kept being responsive to the needs of the taxpayers. You may have to make a few little, additional moves to get where you need to get to. But other than that, I think the personnel there has done a tremendous job and kept a tremendous attitude in doing it.
Thank you. Ms. Barnes, would you please direct our final question to Ms. Erickson-Putman?
Ms. Erickson-Putman, what steps should the board do to help the county grow in population-wise?
I think that anytime you want to grow, when you want to expand, you have to be assured that there's, education available for training. You have to make sure there's quality of life issues that are addressed. You have to recruit in what is your stronghold, what is your strength. If you can diversify, you need to jump on it. But it's all a part of a balance, checks and balance kind of thing that you have, and you don't ignore any one of those things at the same time. It's best for Woodbury County to be a destination rather than a pass-through location. And we need to assure that and cannot forget the importance of ag and other professions as they come forward. This place here is just great, and I don't know how many people know about it, but it's absolutely fantastic. And that should be brought to the forefront, too, for opportunities for our youth.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
Can I have 10 minutes to answer this question?
No, you can have one.
Woodbury County sits in a very unique situation with the tri-state area where, as far as population growth, job growth, that kind of thing, we're not only dealing with our own problems within the county and the state and their job growth opportunities, but the state of South Dakota is just downright brutal on attracting businesses. Nebraska is not that much different. So we're really struggling. I would like to see more utilization in some of our small towns, especially now that the Highway 20 corridor is finally 4-laned. As my opponent says, obviously the agriculture, we need to maintain that as much as possible. That's a huge part of our Woodbury County economy. But I'd like to see some expansion southward from Sioux City with the industrial interchange down there that's soon to be in final phases. But we face a lot of challenges. Our economic development director is doing a fantastic job along with Simcoe and doing what we can to keep this thing rolling.
Thank you. And I want to thank you both for participating tonight in our forum. And I, in particular, want to thank you for your service to our community and to the citizens of Woodbury County. We appreciate the service that you have both rendered.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank our panelists, Kristen Barnes, Teresa Weaver-Basie, and Hannah Adamson. Thank you, ladies, for being here and for asking your questions. In addition, we would like to thank KCAU Siouxland Proud for live streaming this event and for posting the video. And in addition, our wonderful staff here at Western Iowa Tech Community College, Chris Mansfield and Steve Warren's staff have helped us out tremendously. If it weren't for these gentlemen and their efforts, we would not be in this studio, we would not be able to bring this event to you. So thank you both for making this happen. Links to the videos from both the September 30th and tomorrow night, we will have an October 1st candidate forum for our state and also for the county auditor, will be up on the League of Women Voters of Siouxland Facebook page, as well as at the SiouxlandProud.com and WITCC.TV. You can click to your YouTube channel to find us. For more information about the candidates, go to vote411.org. You will be able to compare the candidates and their responses to various questions that obviously we did not have time to ask tonight. We were only able to cover a small portion of the things we know that you are concerned about. The League of Women Voters of Sioux City encourages everyone to vote. If you do not feel comfortable voting at the polling locations on November 3rd, you may request an absentee ballot or vote early at Long Lines Rec Center, 401 Gordon Drive, Sioux City, beginning on October 5th. This option will be open Monday through Friday from 8 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon until October 29th. On October 30th, 31st, and November 2nd, Long Lines will be open from 8 till 5. Thank you all for joining us virtually and watching and becoming informed about the candidates. And there will be an additional candidate forum tomorrow night, and we hope that you will turn in for that. We will also have the Iowa House Districts 13 and 14 and the county auditor tomorrow night. So I hope to have you tune in then. And thank you all again for being here and joining us tonight.